Arena show. Don't miss out on the action. Fast and Furious live. Tickets on sale now at livenation.co.uk.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause to the man who not only wrote that, but also directed the show as well. Please give a massive round of applause to the brilliant Mr. Rowley.
Hello.
So good afternoon, Rowley. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, that is an insane-looking trailer there.
It's cool, isn't it?
So first of all, tell us a bit about how you got involved in the show, because initially from what we've been talking about, you started off working on Top Gear.
Yeah. My hello everybody, by the way. My car entertainment life started on Top Gear. So I was at the BBC when we relaunched it back in 2002, if that gives away my age. And we hired Hammond, and James May just drifted in one day. I was with Top Gear for, in total, the brand, about 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, a long time. So I did about 7.5 on the telly show as a producer, and then was writing and directing Top Gear Live, which was like a touring version of Top Gear with the 3 presenters. And it was that then bounced me into Fast and Furious.
And where did you get the idea from? Where did you get because from what I understand, Fast Live has a plot, it's got actors, it's got the cars, so it's kind of expanding the world that we see on the screen. So how did you come up with all of that?
Well, basically, on Top Gear Live, we would do what I would describe as an A or a B sequence. So like an A sequence would be the presenters are going to race cars made out of washing machines, or we're going to try and build an electric car. And then a B sequence would be a big, sexy stunt driving sequence, big kind of expensive, everything explodes. And it was while I was touring Top Gear Live, I'm a big fan of Fast and Furious. I'm like a massive car geek. And I just thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could make the whole show a B sequence? Everything that happened in the show, all, spectacular stunt driving. And I just thought Fast and Furious was the perfect brand. It's like the biggest car brand in the world, so I thought it's the perfect brand for it.
And then, how did you then come up with things like the story and everything else like that? What was your process to get all of that done?
Well, when I first wrote the show, it was a long time ago, and I have to confess, the very first draft of it was like one presenter, like a kind of mustachioed stuntman, like Burt Reynolds with a jacket that said The Living Daylights on the back, who was like, "Hey everybody, I'm going to show you some stunts from the movies," which is crap. And it was like the very first draft. And then I described it as like brushing away dinosaur bones, like the whole structure of the show was in there. I just needed to get to it. So I was like, well, we can't have one actor, we need 2, because they need to talk. And I was like, well, then why aren't they characters from within Fast and Furious? Why aren't they within the canon of Fast? And then it was like, well, if they're going to be characters from Fast and Furious, then they need a storyline. And the show kind of uncovered itself over a period of time.
And so you have this idea, and you've got this concept, and you've got this expanded world, because Fast and Furious has grown massively since you started writing it. How did you then get to that golden door, which is Universal, to actually get this started? Well, I mean,
it started with I sat in the flat for about 2 weeks with the box set of Fast and Furious and a pen and a pad and just wrote the show. I was like, I just need to write it, because I was doing my wife's head in at the time, going on and on about how cool it would be if we pulled the safe through the streets of Rio and all that stuff. So I wrote the show, and luckily I have an old pal of mine, a guy called Chris Hughes, who's a business owner and has always invested in my creativity in the past. And I said to him, wouldn't it be cool if we went to LA and pitched Fast and Furious to the studio? And he agreed only because he wanted to go to the theme park. In all honesty, he was like, I'll go to the theme park with you, and then we'll do a meeting. And I pitched basically the janitor at Universal Licensing. Like, it was just someone who made Minions for a living. But they thought it was a good idea, and they passed it up, and then passed it up. And eventually I ended up pitching the board of Universal with the concept.
What was that like? Because these are powerful people in that industry, and then you're standing in front of them with this idea that you've had. How did you feel, and how did the presentation of it went well, but how did you feel at the time?
I mean, totally fucking terrified is the truth of it. I mean, I'm just a kid from West London, and I'm driving into the gates of Universal Pictures. I remember in the taxi I had my headphones on, I was like playing Fast and Furious music, And I was like trying to stay in the brand as much as possible because I'd done 15 years on Top Gear, and I was just terrified that I was going to say Top Gear by mistake because I'd spent every day of my life, I'd probably said it 150 times, and I was just terrified I was going to go, so in Top Gear, shit. But yeah, it was terrifying, and it was literally the board all the way up to the president of the studio. And they told me before I went in, they were like, look, Rowley, honestly, they're really, really busy people, so they're going to be, don't be, if they go on their phones, don't feel bad. They're probably going to leave midway through, but that's not on you. Just do your thing. The studio's really busy at the moment. So I kind of went in terrified, but they sat it out. They sat all the way to the end, and I got this massive round of applause, which was apparently unheard of. And I think it was at that point I just thought, well, actually, maybe this is crazy enough to work.
Wow. And how long after that meeting did they tell you, yeah, we're going to go? Or did they even tell you right out of the meeting?
No, they never tell you anything at the meeting. They just kind of wave you off, and then you fly home going, what happened? It was probably about 2 to 3 years of development before they finally went, you should make the show.
Wow.
There's a bit of a tug of love between me and the studio, because the studio count the time from the point where they said yes to opening night, which is just 2 years. But I started seeing them 5 years ago, so they forget my 3 years, but they're quite important to me, so I hang on to them.
So overall then, how long has this taken you from idea then to actual physical show?
About 5.5 years.
Wow.
Which is a long time, actually, isn't it?
It
Which
is
is
a
why you
lot.
all need to come and see the show, otherwise it will just be a massive waste of time. No, I'm kidding. No, it's going really well, so it was worth it.
And during that 5 years, the Fast and Furious, as we mentioned earlier, has kind of grown. It's expanded. There's talks of now like spin-offs and everything else like that. How do you then, as a creative, try to absorb all of that extra stuff that's created, kind of in that universe? Do you try to fix it into your show, or do you just think, right, hang on, that's another spin-off we've got here?
Well, because the show was so long in getting going, I actually did that process with 7 and 8, because when I first wrote the show, they'd only got to 6. And then they rang me up and they went, look, we're making 7 and we really want you to do something with 7 in the show. So we'll fly you out, you can watch an early cut,
Wow.
and then see if you can write something into the show. So I was like, cool. So I did that, watched 7 in the studio, came home, wrote a sequence from 7, put it in the show. More conversations happened and more meetings, and then they were making 8. And that was really close. I was just about to start building the show at that point, and we'd literally started in January, and in February they said, look, we're releasing number 8 in April. It's got to be in the show, because by the time we open at the end of the year, it will have been out in the cinema for 3 months, or it would have been out from 3 months. So I've flown back over. I watched like a 4-hour early cut of Fast and Furious 8.
Wow.
And again, wrote a big sequence, which is actually the sequence which ends the first half of the show, the big submarine chase sequence, which was cool. It's an amazing scene in the show, because the guys try and take down this kind of a Kula-class submarine, and it breaks up through the ice, and they blow it up with this heat-seeking missile, and it's a really amazing scene, and it's the kind of the final part of the movie. But it was a complete bugger to create as a live sequence. There's no doubt about it. When I got back and told the guys, right, we're going to do this thing where we chase this sub and it's going to explode, and there's this car with an afterburner because it's got an EMP device on it, and the guys were just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And how do you do that, though? How do you create these sequences? Because from what you're saying there seems to be, you've got like these incredible sequences, like the bank chase in Rio we just mentioned, and the sub chase. How do you do that? How do you bring it alive? What technologies do you use? Because from the trailer there, we saw a lot of digital screen technology used. We saw a lot of the actual cars being driven. So how did you kind of go about making that happen?
Well, projection mapping is a big tech within the show. So you guys have probably seen it when they project onto buildings, and the building falls down or it fills with water and stuff. So what we did was we took that concept and added floor mapping to create environment mapping. So what it means is, it means the whole arena turns into an icy tundra, or the whole arena turns into Rio, and it's kind of cool. We're really pushing the limits of the technology. So it allows us to bounce around countries and scenes as the movies do.
So what for you was the hardest one to do then? What was the hardest of the setups that you had to do?
I mean, they're all difficult in their own way. I think as a director, you're constantly just pivoting from one problem to another, and like part of my job is about realizing the kind of the dead ends that the production's heading down. They're usually always expensive dead ends, and the ones that you have to double down on and make sure that you push through. I think the sub-attack scene from Fast and Furious 8 was really tricky, because I was determined to make a submarine rise up out of the floor. And they kept sending me these drawings, and I was going, oh, it needs to be bigger, it needs to be bigger. And you know, I don't really understand how big these things are in drawings. Do you know what I mean? They give you all this. Yeah. They never put like a little person next to it or something that you can look at and go, okay, I see how big it is now. It's always just got a million different. It's like a schematic, you know.
Yeah.
So I just decided I was going to constantly say stuff was not big enough. And then when it first turned up, it was enormous. I mean, it's bigger than a lorry. It's a huge, great thing. And there's a few other things in the show, like we have the front nose of a cargo plane that crashes through the arena floor, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that also fell foul to the fact that I just kept saying, oh, it needs to be bigger, it needs to be bigger. And then it turned up, and I was like, possibly too big. But like with a brand like that, you can't go wrong.
No, I mean, it sounds incredibly impressive, I mean, from what you're saying. And what was it like then for you? Because you're a director, not only the writer, but you're the director as well, and you've pitched Universal. When you first got a chance to see it all together, and you've got your director's hat on, but at the same time you want to be geeking out and enjoying it, how did you kind of deal with that?
I mean, basically being sustained completely in terror is how I dealt with it. Because, you know, I wrote the show and I didn't necessarily embark upon it to write the script. But because I knew so much about the show, I was like, well, I'll do the first draft and then we'll see where we go from there. And then took it to the studio and saw Chris Morgan, who has written movies 3 to 8 and is writing 9 at the moment and is a complete genius. And he was like, just keep going, just keep going. And I was like, okay. So I kind of shuffled back to London and I keep writing, and kind of accidentally wrote the whole show, which was not my intention at all, because you don't go to someone like Chris Morgan or a studio like Universal Pictures and go, I've got an idea, it's a whole new storyline to do with your most valuable brand, and you've never heard of me, and check this out. So it all kind of grew and evolved, but it did mean that by the time we got to opening night, I did feel like there was an awful lot of pressure, because it's one, you know, you didn't have to look very far to find the person who was responsible if it didn't work. So
yeah.
Gladly it did.
And it's a big franchise when we know one of the leading men in there, of course, is Mr. Vin Diesel. Did he see the project? Did he get involved at any point? And what was his reaction?
Yeah, so I always knew I'd have to see Vin at some point because he's a producer of the movies. And the studio were like, because it's a homegrown brand, Fast and Furious, they created the first movie in 2001 and they've made every one since. It's a real family production. And they were like, look, you're going to have to see every producer, every director. You're going to have to go and see all the uncles and aunts and nieces and nephews, and you've got to explain your show to everybody. And if anybody doesn't like it, we're not going to do it.
Wow.
So it was quite a task. So I always knew that I would see Vin. So I met him in LA, and again, I was warned. I was like, look, he might turn up really late. He might bring like loads of people, like 20, 30 people with him. Or he might come by himself, we just don't know. So then when he arrived bang on time, all by himself, and just sat down at the end of the table and went, so what is it? Like, what's the idea? I was blown away. And I mean, he was open to it, but obviously, like, I'm a kid from London with an idea for his movie. So I think, you know, I needed to prove the idea. But I could tell by about the second or the third sequence into the storyboards that he was really, really enjoying it, and then he started laughing and clapping and heckling me, and I just knew at that point, you know, that we're onto a winner. So yeah, we kind of parted, and then I saw him again when he was doing his Fast and Furious 8 promo stuff, which was pretty cool, and was a perfect example of how my life was like. I was like inside the brand and outside at the same time, because I was in Soundstage 6 in the studio with him as he was doing the Fast 8 stuff. And then in the afternoon, they were doing some other things that I couldn't see, so I left. And I went to the park, and the park's got this tram ride that goes around, and it goes through the sound studios. And we got past Soundstage 6, and the woman at the front was like, everyone's got to be quiet because they're filming something in Soundstage 6. We can't tell you what it is, but we've got to be very, very quiet. And I just thought, like, it's so weird that morning I was spent with him, and then this afternoon, I'm like back to being a fan again on a tram ride going around the outside of it. But anyway, I digress. So and he was great, and he was like, you know, Dom Toretto's got to be the face of this. So he was in New York a few weeks later on holiday, and he came down, and we did some filming. So he's done some custom-made stuff for the show, and he kind of introduces the audience to it, and it brings the audience through the show. So he's been amazing, absolutely amazing.
And so essentially, did you have to direct him then?
Yeah, that was another thing I just kind of accidentally fell into, which wasn't my plan. I kind of thought, well, I'll just hire like Steven Spielberg or something to do it, somebody who really, really knows what they're doing. But he was like, no, it's fine, you got this. And I was like, okay, all right then. So like my whole career is based around just being dumped into situations I wasn't necessarily planning or nor had prepared for, but then managed to make it work. And he's such a professional, like he knows Dom Toretto. He doesn't need me to go, why don't you try and do this with your face? So it was just a kind of observation job. But yeah, no, it was, filming him was amazing and important for the show. Like, you can't come to Fast and Furious Live and not see Dom Toretto as the first face that you see.
Yeah. And did he see the live show when it was all said and done, and what did he think of it?
I mean, he did. You know, he said to me when we were filming, he said, I'm going to come and see the show. And I was like, yeah. Like, you know, I'm in the industry. Yeah, of course. He's going, no, really, I'm going to come. I'm like, yeah, I'll see you at the O2. And then we had this phone call from his people going, oh, yeah, he's getting his flight organised and he's coming over to the premiere. And then he turned up and came backstage. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, I told you I was going to come. I was like, yeah, but I just thought that was just something people say, you know, when they go, oh, yeah, come and stay around at mine. And you're like, oh, no, don't really come and stay at mine. I just figured it was one of those. So, yeah, he loved the show. He gave me this massive hug at the end and just said, you know, he said to me, it's like someone had made a montage of the best bits of my whole life and just mashed them together and done them live. He was like, it was incredible. That's
such an incredible compliment. You must have been so thrilled with that.
Yeah, I didn't realise how big a deal him loving the show was going to be until he said he loved the show. I was like, at that point, I'd been working 7 days a week for like 15 months, so I was just kind of a bit wide-eyed, but it did mean a lot when he said it.
So we've got some time left, so if you would like to ask questions to Ali, please feel free to stick your hand up and I'll come round to you. If you'd like to ask him anything about Fast Live and working on it, please feel free.
There's a lot more people in here than when I first started talking, which is good.
So for you then, if we talk about the actual show and casting it then, because that's going to be a very difficult challenge, because you can't just hire traditional actors in this project, I'd imagine, can you? How did you go about the casting of that, and how long did that process take?
Well, we've got two main actors. We've got a DSS agent, which is kind of in the style of Luke Hobbs. You know, we've kind of kept quite similar to the brand. And then we have a female street racer called Sophia Diaz. And the characters were created alongside the studio. You know, we sat down and went, right, who are these people? You know, what's their backstory? How do they fit in? You know, who do they know within the main canon of Fast and Furious? And then the auditioning process just took forever, to be honest, because I was anxious that I couldn't go to LA with casting tapes for not great actors, because, you know, they have the budgets in the movies to send out casting directors for a year and spend £1 million on the process, and I was trying to do it, you know, as tightly controlled as possible. So yeah, we saw something like 3,000 or 4,000 Sophia Diaz.
Wow.
Which is, you know, we knew we wanted her to be Latin looking, you know, so I saw so many girls with long brown hair and brown eyes who could do a Latin accent. I was just like snowblind by the end of it. But luckily we managed to find our girl Alicia Wren, who's incredible in the show actually. And the two of them do some real performances. I mean, they're really out there every night acting.
And for you then, I mean, when you're doing a show like this, there's a lot of mechanical elements involved. You've got a lot of cars that are involved. How do you kind of go about making sure that you've got contingency plans for if something goes wrong? How do you build that into it?
Well, I mean, it starts by you spend a lot of money building these things in the first place, because we know a car needs to do 400 shows a year for the next 5 years. So we know it's going to need to be robust. Yeah. So for the most part, the stuff that we've been building is reliable and works. But we always have a kind of a backup plan for if that car goes down or if that car goes down. We kind of the difficult thing is that because we go through all 8 films and we take the biggest sequence from each movie, it's very difficult to just swap something out. You know, so like in Rio, we're dragging a safe through the streets of Rio and smashing into stuff, and it's been chased by these 3 police cars. And it's like you could lose a police car, but you couldn't lose one of the black Dodge Chargers that pulls the safe. So as a result, we've got a team of these incredible mechanics that can they can change a clutch in 20 minutes. So they're very busy throughout the show, just making sure everything stays on its feet.
Wow, that's an intense thing to manage on itself. And how do you kind of make sure that, as a director, that you are kind of keeping all the parts moving? Because I imagine for you, do you go to every show, or do you just leave it in the capable hands of somebody else?
I have been to every show so far, so I'd like to claim I don't need to be at every show, but I have actually been at every show so far, apart from actually this weekend, because I'm here with you guys, because the show's in Portugal at the moment. It's in Lisbon running, so this is my first weekend away. Wow. And I mean, it's tricky because it's like you feel like a parent of it when you write a show and direct it. You know, but the hard thing as a director is all you can ever do is sit and watch stuff like not be as perfect as it was when you first created it, you know. And I'm not talking about like massive things, but you know, when you do a premiere, you know, you spend so much anxiety and energy making sure that every word is said in exactly the right way in exactly the right moment, and every door opens and every explosion happens exactly on the beat. And the truth is, within a live show, there's so much give. That's part of the excitement, I think, of live stuff, is that, you know, sometimes things do go wrong. Sometimes the back of the truck from the first movie does smack into the back of the Toyota Supra and smash its spoiler, you know. But like, as someone who likes motorsport, I just go, well, that's part of the ticket. But it is hard to sit as an observer and watch it over and over and over again. It's like...
Has there been any moments where something's happened during the production that you weren't quite planning on, and you're standing there going, oh, God, am I going to...
As in things that we...
Could go wrong, or have gone wrong, sorry.
During the build or during the show?
Both, really, I guess.
During the build, I wanted to do this massive jump, which is at the end of Fast and Furious 8, where the ice charger jumps the submarine, and then this kind of heat seeker comes scudding into the side and the sub explodes. And I really wanted to do that as the end of the first half of the show. And it just got to the point where they were like, Rowley, the ramps, the takeoff and the landing ramp is like 10 meters long and it's 5 meters wide and there's 2 of them and it's going to take 2 trucks and like we're going to have to completely rebuild the suspension of the charger every 10 shows because of the landing, and they're worried about the flamethrower system on the back braking, and I just went, look, we're just going to have to park that and come back to it later in the tour when I can figure out a way of doing it without these massive things. And as a director, as you tour it, you spot stuff, you know, you see things differently the more you watch things on repetition. So I've been driving the production mad, actually, for the last couple of months, because I've been changing it and tweaking it and altering things and shuffling stuff about. So it's even if you came and saw it at the O2, the show that you'd see now is different, but that's just very theatrical tool, really, that kind of those changes.
And do you think that's going to be to your advantage as well? Because if you've got a product that's ever evolving and you've got a franchise which is ever evolving, it means that you're able to keep evolving with the franchise simultaneously and almost increase your longevity, would you say?
Yeah, I think for me, the show needed to be interactive. So the audience was always the missing link. So like I'd been to see another rival arena show based on another big movie franchise, and it was like 90 minutes of punching. And like I love like that sort of stuff. Like I'm a boy, I like watching things punch other things. But I just felt like if we all got up and left the arena, they'd all just be punching each other for another 90 minutes. And so when I wrote Fast, I really wanted it to be interactive. I wanted the audience to be involved in the storyline. And we do that right from the top. So right at the top of the show, Sophia breaks the wall, she draws back the curtain, she talks directly to the audience, you know, this kind of Ferris Bueller style, day off style, where she goes to them, look, you know, these DSS guys are a bunch of jokers, I'm going to need your help in order to take this guy down. And we bring the audience into the storyline. So everyone who buys a ticket gets a voting card, and they're able to vote on certain decisions within the show. And it subtly alters the narrative. Obviously, there's only so many different endings we can have. Yeah. But it subtly alters the narrative all the way through. Wow. And so for me, that was really a cool thing to do. But until I got my very first audience in, I didn't know whether it was going to be a massive success or not. So once we got the first crowd in Liverpool for some pre-shows, it was at that point it kind of kicked off. That needs to be a bit shorter, or they're not understanding that bit, or this is not making any sense anymore. So in many respects, having the audience in was vital. Without the audience, it really didn't make any sense.
And yeah, you said yourself you're a car geek, and I know that you're also a bit of a geek yourself as well. If you could then now go and do any franchise other than Fast, if you could produce another live show based on any franchise, on any movie or any TV show.
Star Wars.
There you go.
It would be Star Wars. Star Wars would make an amazing arena show, but I know from internally the complexities around doing that, but I just think Star Wars would make the most amazing arena show. The best moments from across all the movies live would be just mega, absolutely mega.
And you get to work with people like George Lucas, you get to work with all of those people, and John Williams for the score and everything else. And Fast has a really cool music soundtrack to it. How did you get involved in that side of it? Did you get to work with all the composers and all of the musicians as well?
Yeah, because Fast and Furious the music of Fast and Furious is quite a big deal for it. It's part of, if you hear a track from Fast and Furious, you know it's a Fast and Furious track. And obviously they've had a whole bunch of massive hits with their songs through the last 3 movies. So music was like quite a hot potato. It was like, we need to get this right. So I hired a composer called James Seymour Brett, who had done Walking with Dinosaurs live, he did Batman live, he did loads of movies, so he'd worked on a whole, Alien vs. Predator, he did a whole bunch of films. So he really knew what he was doing, because I hadn't made a show that needed all new composition before like this, where every moment of a show needs to be written from fresh. So luckily we had James Brett, and he wrote some just incredible stuff. He managed to absorb all of what Fast and Furious is, and then create it as a score for all the sequences. But then we also add the actual music from Fast and Furious, because like without See You Again in the show, it wouldn't feel like Fast and Furious. So we've got those big kind of needle drop tracks as well.
And we're just about out of time, but before we go around, how can people get tickets to this? If you're like me and you think, actually, I want to go and see this, how can they get tickets?
It's a good question. Online, so we've got fastandfuriouslive.com is our website, so you can get in through there. Ticketmaster is the person who's touring it through the UK. So we're in Europe at the moment. We started at the O2 and then we went through into Europe, and we're back in Newcastle in 2 weeks. We come to Birmingham. I think we do 5 dates here. Our marketing director's in here somewhere, she'll know. 5 dates in the UK, and then it's off to like China, America, Japan, and I don't know whether it'll even ever come back. So do buy a ticket, do come and see the show, because the truth is, and this is no hard sell as the director, that nobody's ever made a show like Fast and Furious Live before, and no one will ever have the brand to do it again. Not with cars, not the way that we've done it. So come see it.
Well, Birmingham, please join me in giving a massive round of applause to the brilliant Rowley.
Thank you very much.
And from Fast Live.